Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear colleagues, in the at the first session of the communication, we understood what is communication, and we discussed that the communication word has been derived from the word commune, which means sharing, and the same commune is the basis for the word community, a group of people who share the same features, and then the communication. And then we discussed that the communication has three components: a sender, a receiver, and then a medium through which the sender sends the messages and the receiver understands the messages. And that medium is three types: the oral medium, the written medium, and the visual medium. And then we discussed that the communication is a two-way process. On one end it's the sender, and the other way it's the receiver. The sender speaks and the receiver listens, and unless both are actually involved in that, and clearly involved in that, the communication is not going to be a successful process. It may be a failed communication. Then we discussed that both the speaking and the listening, it has got three components: the verbal component, the paraverbal component, and the non-verbal component. And I said that in today's session we shall be talking about these components. So today we shall discuss the speaking components, the verbal, paraverbal, and non-verbal, and we shall understand what these components means and how we can make our speaking an effective speaking. And in tomorrow's session, we shall discuss the three components of a listening, these three components, and we shall see how can we make the listening as an active listening. So coming to the speaking, as I said before, the act of speaking has three components: the verbal component, the paraverbal component, and the non-verbal component. The verbal component refers to the content of our message, the choice and arrangement of our words. In short, the words we choose. So the words which we are uttering, or we are choosing for our speaking, this is the verbal component of speaking. But I am speaking to you, what words I am using, this is the verbal component. Then comes the paraverbal component of speaking. This refers to how we say that what we say, a way of our speaking, the style of our uttering the words, the tone, pacing, and volume of our voice. This is the paraverbal component of the speaking. In short, how we say the words. Verbal component means the words which we choose for speaking, and the paraverbal component will be how we say those words. Now the non-verbal component. It refers to the message we send through our body language. In short, our body language. So the verbal component is the words which I am using for my speaking, and the paraverbal, how I'm using these words, the tone, the pacing, the volume. And of course, the non-verbal component is the body language. So when these three are at the desirable level, then the speaking is a very effective speaking. Let's understand these in more detail. Taking first the verbal component, or the verbal messages of a speaking. Our use of language has tremendous power in the type of atmosphere that is created at the problem-solving table. So this we know. It may be a problem solving. It may be you want somebody to convey your message, your plan, your mindset. So the our language has a tremendous power. Words that are critical, blaming, judgmental, are accurately tend to create a resistant and defensive mindset that is not conductive or productive problem solving. So if we are solving a problem, for example, and we are using critical words, we are blaming the other, we are judgmental, already we have decided that he's or she is going to be that way, or we are accusatory languages. So what it will does, it will create a resistance, a defensive mindset on the counterpart. So this is very, very important. Then, if we can choose words that normalize the issues and problem and reduce resistance, so our speaking will be very, very effective. So, how the words are being used, this is very, very important. Sending effective messages requires that we state our point of view as briefly and uh, clearly as possible. So, this is another one, that our message should be crisp and clear. Listening to a rambling or unorganized speaker is tedious and discouraging. We know that. You must have noticed this in some seminars, in conferences, in classrooms, or in gathering, that the speaker is not clear in his or her words, then you lose the concentration and the speaker lose the audience. So why the listeners will continue to listen to that? So this is very, very important. Then lengthy dissertations and very long explanations are also confusing to the listener. This is very important. And you should come to the level of your listener and discuss or explain to his or her level. This is very important. We know that levels of each and every person may not be the same. So the speaker needs to come to the level of the listener, and then he or she will be able to explain his or her point. Similarly, the choosing of the words to make your message as clear as possible is the key for a successful communication. This is the how we choose the words. At the first component, that is the verbal component of the speaking. So if I repeat or summarize the verbal component of a speaking, the effective verbal messages are brief, the crisp and organized. They are free of jargon, and they do not create resistance in the listener. So when these three characteristics are present, your verbal component is to the desirable level. Now coming to the para-verbal component of speaking. We know that the para-verbal communication refers to the messages that we transit through the tone, pitch, and pacing of our voices. This is very, very important. How our tone is, what is the volume, what is the pacing, how we give the space between the two words. This is very important. It is how we say something, not what we say. What we say was the verbal component. How we say is the non-verbal component. The paraverbal message, the studies have shown, it accounts for approximately 38% of what is communicated to someone. So the 38% of the impact of speaking is through the para-verbal component, or the tone, the voice, and the way we are uttering those words. A sentence can convey entirely different meanings depending on the emphasis on words and tone of voice. For example, the statement like, didn't say you are stupid. This is one sentence. I didn't say you are stupid. So it has many meanings depending on which word is emphasized. For example, I didn't say you are stupid. I didn't say you are stupid. I didn't say you were stupid. I didn't say you are stupid. No, these three sentences, they are having different meanings. I didn't say you were stupid. I did not say you were stupid. I didn't say you were stupid. So this is the way how the tone and the paraverbal component makes a difference. So some points to remember about our paraverbal communication is when we are angry or excited, our speech tends to become more rigid and highly pitched, and we should be careful of it. Second, when we are bored or feeling down, our speech tends to slow and take on a monotone quality. So again, we should be careful of it. And when we are feeling defensive, our speech is often abrupt. So this is, we should be aware of the para-verbal component of our speaking, and if we can take care of it, we can be a very good speaker in the communication. If I summarize the para-verbal messages component, I will repeat that it accounts for about 38% of what is perceived and understood by others. So this is very, very important. And it includes the tone, pitch, and pacing of our voice. Now coming to the non-verbal component, and this is again very important in speaking. The non-verbal component is the power of non-verbal component cannot be underestimated, we know that. And the messages we send through our posture, facial expression, and spatial distance account for 55%. So you see, 55 and 38%. How much is the non-verbal component and paraverbal component matters? So it accounts for 55% of what is perceived and understood by others. In fact, through our body language, we are always communicating whether we want to or not. So this is very, very important. Non-verbal messages are the primary way that we communicate emotions. The effective non-verbal messages, as I said, it accounts for 55%, and this may be facial expressions as well as our postures and gestures while communicating, while speaking. If we take the facial expression, the face is perhaps the most important conveyor of emotional information. We know that. A face can lighten up with enthusiasm, energy, and approval, express confusion or boredom, and scold the displeasure. We know that. The eyes are particularly expressive in telegraphing joy, sadness, anger, and confusion. We know that. Coming to the postures and gestures, our body posture can create a feeling of warm openness or cold rejection. For example, when someone faces us sitting quietly with hands loosely folded in the lap, a feeling of anticipation and interest is created. A posture of arms crossed on the chest portrays a feeling of inflexibility, like this. The action of gathering up one's materials and reaching for a per signal a desire to end conversation. So the facial expression and the posture and gesture, these are very, very important components of the non-verbal component of a speaking. So, dear colleagues, I end here. Tomorrow we shall discuss the verbal, paraverbal, and non-verbal component of listening. Today we discussed these features of speaking, and the tomorrow we'll see the listening. Then how what are these three components and how these are important in the communication process. Take care. Goodbye. Khuda Hafiz.